to our informational webinar for nominees and potential nominees for the Shared Capital Board of Directors. My name is Adam Trott, and I'm the Director of Member Relations. Gabby, could I just have you introduce yourself with your position at Shared Capital?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby Chapman. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a program manager at Shared Capital, and I've been with Shared Capital for almost 2 years. And I can kind of talk a little bit more about what I do later in the webinar.
Great, thanks. And I appreciate that, Gabby. I use he, him. Welcome to Jamie and Matthew and everyone else who shows up. We did want to go through a couple of slides just to give you the basics on what's happening this year. There's only about 15 slides, so just be a short part of the presentation because we're really interested in having discussion and opening up discussion on what people want to do. So yeah, we have an interesting year this year because we've got a number of seats open. And again, we were just talking, we don't expect people to be experts, quote unquote, on co-ops to be part of our board. We actually just want you to support our mission. So here's the mission. We want to build a just, equitable, and democratic economy through cooperative enterprise. That's why we're here. We are actually a cooperative and we lend to cooperatives. So that's kind of like a nice cooperative economy role we have. This year, we do have 6 seats open. That's more than usual because we had 2 long-standing board members who we love step down mid-term because of larger projects with their particular work. So we've got a couple extra seats open this year. 5 of those will represent our cooperative members out of our 11-seat board, and 1 of them will represent our individual members of the individual seat. And that's really interesting because we have a whole other channel of communication there with a different set of members. A lot of our individual members are invested. You don't have to. You can just be a member. And that's really great for us to gain that perspective. We'll go through the details, but just so you know, you do have to be nominated by a member. You don't necessarily have to work or be a member of a Shared Capital member. You do not have to, but you do have to have an endorsement of some type. I can assist you with that. And also, for example, we've got Charity Schmidt, who's on our board, who's excellent, and Charity represents MadWork because MadWork, Madison Area Worker Cooperatives, endorsed her last year. So they can't endorse anyone until Charity were to step back down. Okay, just a couple of pieces of information on who Shared Capital is. We really are a co-op. We incorporated as one. We are a CDFI, primarily for financial access, serving people traditionally marginalized or prevented from access to capital. And we really want to cooperatize capital. That's something that we want to do, provide truly cooperative capital from co-ops themselves and from those who support them. A couple of other pieces of information is that we do have between 7 and 11 directors. We aim for 11. We've had 11 at least since I've been here. And we seek a lot of diversities. And Gabby, I want to open this up to you in case you want to add something from the committee you run. But we seek diversities in a number of ways, including different sectors, race, sex, gender, and understanding skill sets and what we want to do for our mission. Gabby, I don't know if now is an okay time for you to add a couple.
Yeah, I think that what's important to share here is I think Shared Capital has been working for a long time on economic and racial justice within their work. But more recently, we've actually codified a policy around DEIJ and racial justice. And the way that looks is thinking about when we're actually making loans, assessing the cooperatives' DEI plan. Do they have a racial justice plan? Are you thinking about that? So I just think it's important to note as we think about our board of directors to make sure that we're not looking for necessarily experts in finance, but we definitely want people that are really thinking about racial and economic justice, and that being the forefront of how we lend.
Thanks, Gabby. I'm just going to share again to go through the rest of the slides. Yeah, this is something that's really important to us. We've been doing this for years to really have as representative of a board as we can. Just to say, there's no financial liability for you as a board member. There's what's called indemnification. So after 45 years, I don't think this will be an issue, but should anything happen, anything that Shared Capital owes you will not be on the hook for. And we also have insurance for that item to back that up. So just a couple of responsibilities for members of the board. We do have quarterly board meetings. One of those, it's usually one in person a year. For the past couple of years, we haven't done that due to COVID. We're trying to start that up again this year. In September, we're aiming for Chicago, which will coincide with a close partner of ours, the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. They're going to have their conference in September in Chicago, and we're going to have our in-person board meeting right before that week before. Just so you know, Shared Capital covers all travel and lodging expenses, and we usually organize meals and that kind of thing. But that's the meeting requirement. Board meetings are about 2.5 hours. Then every board member is expected to be on a committee, and I list the committees here: executive, which are officers. We have an officer election every year. Finance, loan, racial justice committee. And we also have some people who are in our committees that are not on the board. This is to help us, again, represent partnership and more diversities in the discussion, which has been really handy in a lot of ways to help us round out, making the best information possible, especially with our investors mostly being co-ops and individuals who really believe in this mission. It's something that's really important to us. I did want to put this up there just so you understand what it would take, kind of what's expected. If you're missing a couple meetings in a row, or if you miss more than a third, it's not that there's any automatic removal or anything like that, but we might just reach out with our staff or perhaps the chair to say, you okay? Is there anything we can do to support you? We understand timing is nuts, and that's the ongoing challenge, is to get cooperators' voices in these rooms while they're also running their own business and have a million things that are balancing. Also, if you're nominated, you're endorsing member of Shared Capital, if they no longer are a member, we have to find a different endorsement. And then if there's anything where you are no longer a member of that, or if your association with that changes, we have to find out something else. Okay, just a little about Shared Capital itself. Just kind of revisiting this, so you have a sense. We've got more than 300 cooperative members. We have about 100 individual members. And to borrow from Shared Capital, you have to be a member. That's kind of who we are. We really are a cooperative, as we mentioned. And in a way, we're a borrower's co-op, because that's our first priority with surplus. So when we're going to give any kind of patronage or dividends at the end of the year, we have to give patronage to our members before it goes to anyone else. And that's the priority, and it always has been. And we've given back, I think last year was 17, I'm not going to get these numbers exact, but we've had between $17,000 and $40,000 go back to borrowers the past couple of years per year. And that helps people with their loan, and it just cuts down on their debt, and it's been a phenomenal thing. Again, members nominate who the nominees are. There's no selections by staff or some kind of outside group. And as we already discovered, that we have anything that we make can also kind of come back to members or help us with our growth. This graph just kind of shows a little bit of what we kind of try to do, is to bring all these different groups, all these people who kind of believe in us and support us, and government and foundations, and to use Shared Capital as a channel to fund the cooperative movement. This is an ongoing challenge, and we've got more pipeline need than ever before. We have basically doubled our assets since 2018. And it's been a phenomenal couple of years. So this is a particularly great year for you to be involved. It's a little bit more about our main product, which is lending. We have a lot of different opportunities for different kind of loans all across the cooperative sectors. It's creative and patient. We do startups, conversions, and our loans can go from really small, 5,000, and we made a lot of loans during COVID that were 7,000, 12,000, just for people to get through a tight situation financially, and all those went really well. It's been a really great thing. And of course, we can go up to $1 million just ourselves. And if it's more than that, we can get what's called participation from another lending partner, where they would say, great, we love that loan too. And we do that all the time with partners, including local partners, national, what have you. Just a couple of highlights for you. And again, our mission is really important to us. We really care about that. And as Gabby said, we work really closely with borrowers to talk to them about these goals we have. So almost all, 85% of our financing goes to populations that we really try to focus on. Co-ops that are majority owned by women, people of color, LGBTQ communities, low-income communities, indigenous, immigrant communities. These are all populations we are really intentional about serving. Just last year, so these are just 2023 numbers, a third of our funds went to BIPOC communities. We have an organizational goal of 45%, and that's something we're continually trying to climb up to that goal. Served a bunch of housing units, which was a great year for us with that, and we supported 3 conversions to worker co-ops. Gabby, I only have a couple more slides, but please feel free to jump in if you want, okay?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is if those statistics or if this is an area of interest, our Racial Justice Committee would be a great committee to join. They're really tasked with this high-level review of our policies and procedures and really looking at pertinent information and literature in the racial justice space. So just thinking about how to push our board of directors to make more intentional choices around how we invest in Black and Brown co-ops.
Thanks, Gabby. A little bit of history. I'm not going to go through all these, but we really were founded by cooperatives in the 70s who were unhappy with the products they could get. They either couldn't get money or people didn't know there were a co-op. So it would be, say you and me signing our social security number or a mortgage over or cars. And they founded, at the time, North Country Development Fund to fill that gap together. They formed a co-op. First loan was 1979, $1,000. These probably seem small now, but again, this was a different time. It's like that $1,000 really mattered, and started this whole thing. We've probably made about 1,000 loans now, tens of millions gone out. We're really excited that we've moved through a number of organizational developments, including going national. We got CDFI status in the 90s. We worked with a number of partners to have different collaborations and separate boards for a bunch of things that were happening in the area. And then, yes, between 2021 and 2023, we went from 12 million just a small number of years ago to 20 and now 25 million in assets. And that kind of gritty and dedicated approach is something that we really like. I also wanted to go over just a couple of quick things. I know these things can cause an eye glaze over, but we've got really just wanted to show you what kind of portfolio we have with our lending. So something like 40% for worker, 23 for housing, and 20 for grocers, for food cooperatives. And then we have a number of others too, including multi-stakeholder, federations, etc. And the 42% for worker cooperatives has really increased the past number of years. That's been an intentional thing for us too. There's been a couple of years there where it was hard for worker cooperatives to find financing, so that's something we cared about. And then we also break it down by industry, so you can see a bunch of where our this will help you assess risk or spreading out our portfolio. A lot of it's housing, retail grocery, and then a number of other industries. And I'll send this out. Please don't feel like you need to take notes. We'll have this on the website and we'll send it around to all the attendees. Also, here's just our basic capitalization. And yeah, inverted pyramids can look a little funny because they might tip over, but this actually makes us stronger to have so much common stock, right, associated with a member democratic right. And then it goes on from there with Shared Capital shares, our notes, and just really giving you a broader sense of where our funds come from and what they do. I did want to go over briefly what we're doing with the investment. We had a new DPO launched late 2021. DPO, or direct public offering, is our way to say, hey, you can invest in this. And this took a lot of work. There's a lot of regulations. We have a Regulation A that we went through, and we'll probably renew something really similarly. But we have a number of ways for you to invest. We're looking to raise more money because of an increased pipeline. It's really great that we have more demand than we thought. 2022 nearly doubled 2021 lending, and 2023 nearly doubled again. So that's something we're really trying to, make sure we can add to pipeline. And then there's just one more, I think, on that. Just here's the options for investing. And again, we'll send this out. We'll also drop the website in the chat. Okay. thank you for letting us kind of go through all that information. It can be really detailed. I'm going to leave the screen share up for a moment in case anyone has any questions on the slides part. If not, we can just kind of open up for discussion. Okay, I'll take that as a we don't have to share that presentation any longer, but would love to take your questions on what, what does this help your thoughts on wanting to run? Do you have other questions? Is there something that popped out for you that you want to find out more about?
I was curious with that mention of the DEIJ policy development. I didn't see it on the website. Is that something that I'm assuming could be shared easily?
Yeah, I actually think it may be on the website in the carousel. So on the homepage, there's like a carousel. I think it actually gives you the policy.
There it is.
Yeah. Are you seeing that? Okay. Yeah. Do you have any like specific questions about it?
I was very curious to read it. That was kind of the main thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess on that point,
Spencer, see a new face.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Hello, my name is Spencer. I use he, him pronouns. I am, I live in Minneapolis, and I have been interested in the work of Shared Capital for a couple years, and just saw that this was happening, and just here to listen. Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Welcome.
We'll send you the PowerPoint out as well, as long as we have your information. That way you can see what we just talked about.
Thank you.
Matthew, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, well, no, I was just curious. I mean, so it was mentioned that like there's a 33% is kind of the current state of the BIPOC lending, aiming for 45. I'm just curious about like what that delta feels like for Shared Capital right now. Does it feel like really attainable? We're going to get to 45 soon. How does that feel?
Yeah, we just talked about this earlier. In fact, this is lower than previous years, so we feel pretty confident that it's a number we can attain. I think 2021 it was 50%. I think there is a discussion to be had around thinking about membership and like development around our pipelines. I don't find it as I think it might feel like overwhelming, but I definitely think that we have the ability to do this.
It's great to know. Yeah, it's been done before, so that's
yeah.
Awesome.
I think there's, I mean, I've actually wondered, like, I've had some curiosity around what may have changed or why the decline. I think there has been like ecosystem wise, like there was a lot of capital in like out there in the world at 2020 because of the murder of George Floyd. And I'm thinking maybe there's some like corrections happening around like access to capital. So I don't know, there's deeper conversations to have about it, but yeah, I'd be curious to like talk further about maybe why that's the case.
Other questions, and there's no, just so you know, there's no stupid questions here. We're really excited to talk about whatever it is that's going on for you. This could get as detailed as what kind of time requirement, how much time before a meeting am I expected to have, and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think the question that I'm pondering right now mostly is like, we are, yeah, definitely down for the cause, and I think for us, it's like I have a clear sense of what I would get out of participating and being part of like the conversation and getting a better understanding of how Shared Cooperative works, how the general cooperative movement works. Like, I think it would be a really interesting vantage point, right, to get a sense of like, yeah, what's happening in the movement, where's all the issues, and where's the momentum too. I think it's really interesting. One of the things that I left out in kind of like the little introduction was like in the audio industry and the podcast industry, there seems to be like a lot of excitement around the idea of cooperatives, and a lot of people talking about like how it could be like the kind of industry went through a reckoning last year, and it's like a potential like bright spot for a path forward for a lot of people. And I think on both hands, I'm excited about that. And on the other hand, I'm like, I don't want people to get so excited that they're like, oh, it's going to solve all our problems, and then realize they still have to run a business and stuff, right? And so like, I think we just individually have started like doing some social posts to try and like be like, yes, cooperatives are great, but also like, please don't put all your hopes on cooperatives. We're not going to fix broken financial models. But anyway, all of this is a very long rambling way of saying I'm not super clear on like, other than just like, of course, we bring our perspective and the, you know, can kind of talk about how stuff might apply to our industries and to worker co-ops in general. I'm sort of curious of like beyond, yeah, just the like logistical requirements of being on the board and, you know, being part of those discussions, sort of like what I can bring to the table.
Hey,
And I know part of that's like for me to answer, but yeah, just kind of curious of like, as you're thinking about board composition, yeah, like what kind of makes a successful board director, I guess.
I love this question in this context because it's really important to us and really important to Shared Capital's mission. Gabby, I'll just speak for a minute and please feel free to jump in. For me, I will just say to you specifically, Jamie, that having worker cooperatives on our board is really important to us. Representing our board is really important to us. Right now, we've got Anna Boyer, who works at C4, Tech and Design Cooperative out in New Orleans. She's phenomenal. But that's it. And there's an ongoing challenge about, okay, so, you know, a lot of worker cooperatives are retail or manufacturing or what have you, or a service sector where having time during the day is not possible. And that means we need to do extra work. We try to support people in adding their voice despite that. So if this is something where it could fit in with your schedule, we would be doubly interested because we want that representation. And then also just adding, and I feel this about, well, really any movement, but the cooperative movement is no exception. We want fresh voices from co-ops that just did this. And we want you talking to Ole Olson, who's been doing it for as long as I've known him, 20-something years at Isthmus. Like, we want that, and connecting to other populations throughout the country. So I think this would be a great opportunity for us to learn from you and vice versa. Gabby, did you want to add anything to that? Okay, I covered it in the 3-minute monologue. But just a little bit on the requirements and timing. Let me do that. You know, so the board meetings are 2.5 hours. It's a little bit of time. They usually middle of the day on Tuesdays or Thursdays. We do the calendar. We do adjust calendars for board members as much as we can. And I think that in general, we have the board packet up. Most of the important parts of the board packet up, hopefully a week before. Sometimes it's not a week because it can come together late, but I do not think it's definitely a less than 1-to-1. Like, we're not expecting you to have 2.5 hours that week to prep for a 2.5-hour meeting. In my humble opinion, with focus, you can get through the material in, I would say, 20 to 30 minutes. There's a lot of reporting that's important, but it's also detailed about attendance and things like that. And once you get the hang of looking at those, it's like, okay, everyone attended who was supposed to last time, what have you. Making sure that your numbers are on it. So yeah, I would say that I would say my guess is 30 minutes of prep. Can be less, a little bit more depending, because those board of directors meetings are really where we make decisions, organizational direction, new partnerships, projects, issues that came up. And that's something where a discussion can be larger. And that's where, like, just having the statement that Gabrielle put out, you know, the racial and economic justice statement is really important to us. And this is something that board members led on, staff supported, but these are coming from cooperators. These are coming from our board to say, hey, this is what we want you to do. So that discussion can be something, and you can opt into that. You say, great, I would love to meet outside, or just say, nope, we'll talk to you at the next one. And then committees, there's a little variation here. So I just wanted to cover that. Most of our committees meet monthly. But I think right now that the finance committee is quarterly. So if time is a really important issue, we could try to see if that would be a good fit for you. Again, we do not expect you to be a CPA. That's part of our job. You know, to connect with you, please don't, you know. So that's the basics on that. So one maybe our meeting a month, and then the board meetings every quarter.
On that point, Adam, about the difference between the committees, could you maybe just say a little bit about sort of the charter of those committees?
Yeah, Gabby, do you want to start?
Yeah, actually, I have a charter that the Racial and Economic Justice Committee pulled together. So the goal is to review that charter every other year. Again, it's for the Racial Justice Committee. It's a high-level overview and oversight of the actual applications of the work around racial and economic justice, and just to make sure that the implementation is on track. It also creates this circular accountability process where the Racial Justice Committee is able to evaluate, is this working? What do we need to change? That kind of thing. And I can't speak to the other charters, but that's the one that I worked really hard to help, form. This committee is sort of new. It came out of like a marketing, I think, and comms committee. Ironic, that's kind of odd, but so it's been around for a couple years, but we developed this charter. So I'm feeling really excited about it, because I will say, I mean, everyone, and this is not a issue that's specific to us necessarily, but board of directors are very busy. So sometimes it can be hard to like get everyone in a room and get the thing done, just because schedules and calendars are what they are.
And just to give you kind of a general sense, and we can email out those charters too. The executive committee is pretty straightforward. So that's the place, those are the officers of the board. There's an election after the board election, which we're talking about now. There will be an officer election for the board in the June board meeting, and that'll say, hey, who's president, who's vice president. And the executive committee is a place where the agenda for the board meetings is determined, concepts and let's say strategic planning and any kind of consultancy we need to partner with, that often gets determined or at least heavily informed at the executive committee level, like a typical kind of leadership body. And that's a separate meeting, obviously. So that the executive committee is something of an unsung group of champions who really support us. Then, yeah, Gabby talked about that. The loan committee is really self-explanatory. I just want to share that's like real-time silver dollars. Like if they don't want to lend to a cooperative, we don't lend to them. And a lot of times the vice versa is true, where it's like, okay, well, this might affect our risk rating, or it's something that is not, they're in a difficult spot. But if we can make it work, we will make it work. And I'll just say that a lot of the borrowers who come our way have already gotten no before. Sometimes a couple times, and we really pride ourselves on doing everything we can to put the puzzle pieces together. And the loan committee is the group where staff goes and says, okay, this is as good as we can make it for this group. And then finance committee, you go over the actual financials of Shared Capital. So that could be a fun place for someone who's interested in finance, who wants to learn more, or has expertise they'd like to share.
Kind of related to that, I mean, I know there's also obviously internal Shared Capital employees who do this work. So can you talk a little bit about like the relationship between the board, the committees, and then the employees who's like, that is their job? Like,
yeah, I could start, and then I would also ask Gabby to hop in. As member relations, for me, my job being member relations, I do a lot of support along with Christina, our executive director, to really maintain open lines of communication with the board and committee members. So that's something that is a huge deal for us. And we also try to be efficient as possible. So it's not something where you're getting emails every day or even every week, and have those be periodic and understandable. So what we really want to do is to say, here's kind of the flow chart. So organizationally, those board meetings often have myself in there cataloging things, yet Christina is really the leader in getting, filtering all the information. As executive director, it's her job to really take the board's voice and operationalize and execute. But there's also people who would come on for certain parts of those board meetings. If there's something regarding our pipeline, we'll have the lending team. Something regarding other particular projects or something, we'll have those people who are working on those in the meeting. And then the committees are kind of a miniature version of that, where we're saying, hey, here's something we're really working on. We have to talk about this distinctly. And that's like, we'll get all the information out we can, and the staff person who's related to that will probably be on, unless Christina's right there with it. So, and yeah, there's different staff people on those committees. So I don't, maybe just because we have this statement now, Gabby, if you want to talk about how that was or what that was like for you as staff person.
Yeah, I think from the racial and economic justice perspective, that is really an opportunity for us to utilize also the board, for example, or the committee. They want to prioritize staff input. So it's an opportunity for us to really garner the support of staff around different aspects. We've definitely, with the racial and economic justice work, have went through multiple iterations. And oftentimes those iterations are highly informed by the staff about like, this works or this might not work, and just like giving examples around, what would maybe improve the actual implementation pieces, and kind of kicking that back to the committee to help them think about how to maybe pivot. I hope that helps answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of me wrapping my head around this too is just like the perspective that we're coming from, which is a collective board. And so it's not like we have, some people who are not board members in these conversations, or, non-employee members and directors who, wouldn't be as in touch with the day-to-day operations. So I think, yeah, what you described is super helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, and we embrace collective management. That's something that we love. It's not, it's just not how Shared Capital staff is structured, but I came from a collective background, there's like, we have expertise in staff and experience in staff with that, who have lived in housing co-ops like I do, and Mark, and so, yeah, please, I want you to just feel really welcome with that. Other questions or thoughts before we get to 2 p.m. Central?
I had a kind of related question. I mean, would you say that like the board ascribes to a certain governance system or model?
I don't. The ones that, well, Gabby, I'm curious about your input here too. Maybe, do you want to go first if you have any thoughts?
I mean, I haven't sat in on many of the meetings. I think it's fairly traditional from my take, like Robert rules, motion. But I think it's a great point to raise, because it'd be interesting to think about, like, as new board members, what would it look like to have more of like a sociocratic governance strategy? I don't know. Adam, you want to add?
Oh, I agree. That's kind of it. It's like what kind of grew out of, okay, you form like the agenda, you agree on the agenda, you go through the agenda, and you second that. So Robert's Rules of Order is certainly a part of it.
And yeah, kind of a sort of related question, but maybe a bit stickier. I mean, I'm always curious about boards, specifically in the fact that like we know that, we might call it an aberration of boards to say that like rubber stamping is a thing. That boards are sometimes just like, great, you all the experts, bam, it's all good. And so like I think the most like value add activities of boards can be the hard questions that we ask. Is there, I don't know exactly what the question is exactly, but just like, in your experience, have you found that like board members have been successful gadflies in that way of like asking difficult questions that have like helped spur the organization in productive ways?
Certainly. And Gabby, I don't know if you wanted to start off.
Maybe I could share like in an example, give you an example. We've had some challenging loans like come through that may or may not really be in alignment with our racial and economic justice values. So yeah, I think one of the benefits is struggling together through those tough conversations, and then also being like, maybe we made the wrong decision, as a group, and just thinking about how to come back to things and learn from decisions that we've stood beside, maybe historically, but maybe now we're like, I'm not sure. So yeah, that's a vague kind of answer, but it kind of can give you some ideas of some of the conversations. Another piece is we're going through a strategic planning process, which is, I think, really important to like raise, because new board members would be kind of coming into that. So an RFP is going out in March, mid-March, and then the process will start around May or June. I think it'll be a 3 to 4 month process. But yeah, so I mean, there's opportunity to think a lot strategically about what does the next 3 to 5 years look like? What is the next iteration of Shared Capital? And this next board will be integral to that.
A lot. This might not be a 6-minute question.
I love that you're already laughing. You haven't even asked anything.
But I mean,
Hey, well, this was great.
What you were just talking about, and part of like also the last, I guess, 2-3 years for what you were describing, kind of the history of Shared Capital, like it sounds like growth has been kind of going wild in a great way, right? Like lots of people have been getting access to funds, increasing capital and stuff like that. I know within our cooperative, it's a thing that we're actively hiring right now. So it's a thing that we are actively discussing, is like, how quickly do we want to grow and expand, what feels sustainable and manageable, things like that. Like, I mean, I guess this is probably what we would be discussing in the board meetings, as what you were just saying, for like the next 3 to 5 years. But I guess maybe I'm just curious, like how that process has been. Has it been a lot? I mean, I feel like the answer must be yes, but like, has it felt chaotic, or has it felt like this is where it needs to go and we're ready for it and bring it on?
Maybe just because I've been here a little longer, Gabby, I'll start, but just let me know. So I started 2018, and yeah, we've almost basically doubled since then. Yeah. And I would say that's actually a somewhat manageable pace, and it has not, to me, felt particularly chaotic because of that. And I think this is, I just want to say that, to your point, this is a conversation that's happening at the board level. And, you know, so is there an ideal size? Is this just kind of an open-ended and infinity conversation? And a lot of the feedback is growth for growth's sake is not what Shared Capital wants. Yeah. But it is something where we want to try to field the demand, the heightened demand, while sticking to our mission. And Gabby's example of how it is, this is not a rubber stamp situation. We do not want that. That's not what we encourage in general. You know, there sometimes can be a lot of decisions, and I think some people don't love all the decisions. So they're like, well, you know, the budget approval, I'm not going to look, really. But the larger discussions about growth or how to manage that is on the table. It wasn't talked about the last board meeting specifically, but yeah, we're doing an investment campaign that was in support of the board members who said, yeah, I mean, if we're getting real demand, that's something we, you know, as part of our mission to do. But I'm also happy to talk about that or a couple other things more after. Yeah. But yeah, the fun part for me is that we're getting real input from people out in the field on these items.
Yeah, cool.
Any last couple minutes? Hey, I just want to say thanks to everyone. And Jamie, Matthew, or Spencer, you're all welcome to contact me. I think you've got my contact info, but I'm just going to put it in the chat. And we'll be sending out we'll have the slideshow and the video up on our website probably tomorrow morning, so you can look at that. But also the webpage that talks about the nomination. So I have pretty much everything you need. So, but please contact me. Hey, this is really great. Gabrielle, do you want to do a little sign off, a little goodbye?
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. If you have any more questions, I mean, I think we could talk a lot more about the racial and economic justice pieces, because that's what I'm jazzed up about. I also will put my email in the chat if that's something that you want to like check in on, or have any further questions. Oh, you got me. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I do think this is a great opportunity. We always have competitive elections. So there's oftentimes a great moment where it's like, great, you're going to run. But then there's also a handful of people who didn't get on. But I think this year, just because of the 2 people stepping down, you've got an added advantage, I think, in your nomination. So this could be a great year. Thank you so much. We're really excited about this. It's going to be a wonderful year with new alignment for our strategy. So thanks and stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Okay, bye-bye.